The Labrat DMT trip. Have any of you had an experience of waking up in a realer than real place like a lab? Where you saw that we're being experimented on by creatures more advanced than us? There was a thread on /poll/ the other day that really shook me and many other people. I asked if anyone had experienced the feeling of waking up in a completely different place, feeling realer than real. And I'm not talking hyperspace, I'm talking about a completely different feeling, a futuristic lab similar to the Matrix with scientists/alien creatures observing the simulation or whatever it is. The idea is essentially that psychedelics have the ability to take off the VR goggles and suddenly you see the real world, the reality that we are just lab rats in a vastly complex simulation experiment. I will post screenshots from the thread.
This actually reminds me a lot of my last salvia experience. I woke up on a ship like as a point of consciousness surrounded by entities and a hierarchy was immediately noticeable. There was a doctor and nurses. And observers. They told me, we haven't had someone that can do both in a long time, and, to close my eyes. I think the "we haven't had" comment is referring to being in two places at once, quantumly speaking if that's a word. I existed in my room and my consciousness was blasted out and made aware of another reality. It felt very medical and scientific. My theory is that when a human amplifies their consciousness the ET take notice and observe. They spoke telepathically. The doctor was an insectoid being and the nurse was like a cat-dog mix. It was weird. It was like I was teleported to an off-world medical theater and there were beings watching in all like, another one broke through, type of feeling. Usually salvia takes me completely out of my body but this one was unique. It was balanced, like I became telepathic as heck for 10 minutes and zipped to a UFO. I don't know, man. I don't know.
Have any of you had an experience of waking up in a realer than real place like a lab? I had few dreams like that, like 2 or 3. Dream 1. Wake up in something like a pod bed. Some scientist-looking dude was going over my results. Actually had a score for my current life, pretty low score, like 97 points or something. Could see the score of past lives, in past life was some Hungarian with 12k points. Could see other people sleeping in pods nearby, could see their avatars and their score, as well as time of play, when they will die, etc. My character info said I will die within next 8 months, which DSO seems pretty likely. Dream 2. Woke up in some weird looking lab. Some admin AI was there and it wanted feedback. The admin AI gave a choice to end the simulation immediately and move to next life, or to continue current simulation, saying only 12 to 14% of people chose to continue as the simulation has entered the ending phase. I chose to continue to see the big fireworks. But it's just dreams anon. If this world was a simulation, it would be rather shit lol. Honestly, who would plug into this shit? Be amazing high-tech civilization. Plug into a life of some meaningless, poor pleb so you can wage slave. Literal shitty job simulator. Why even?
I've had this happen to me before. Twice. I've extracted my own DMT from some very special root bark back when you could order it off of Amazon for next to nothing. Those were the realest trips I had ever had. I've taken enough acid to know what the fuck, eaten enough shrooms to see all of the fractals and learn what the mushrooms want us to know, of course forgetting it immediately after I came down, and I extracted over 3 grams of pure DMT. Many trips from an amount of that size. These trips, when I started to master navigating the DMT worlds, were realer than any fucking thing I've ever experienced. I've been to the underground area, that cave that kind of, introduces you to it all, good trips, bad trips where the entities were standing around me, laughing I guess you could say, flicking me in the face with rubber band fingers telling me how I messed up because I burned the DMT, instead of vaporized it. But these doctor visits were unlike anything. The first one. My typical entrance to DMT space begins with these spirals, and a kind of glossy, saran wrap with amazingly intricate patterns all over kind of covers the entire room. All the noises you hear eventually coalesce into a single note. A single, almost vibratory 𝚮𝚵𝚸𝚶. A distinct feeling of everything is getting fuzzy comes over me, and then I know to close my eyes. One orb is in front of me, stationary. It begins to move, almost like it's breathing, and what looks like water begins to emerge from it. But it's not going anywhere, it's kind of going back into itself. Then the patterns inside the water start. And what look like stairs come out of that. And then the intensity just builds until, bop, I'm somewhere else. These ones though, it's not like closing your eyes and imagining something, it's like I just changed the channel. Eyes are open, and it's this world. Eyes are closed, and it's that world. There is no closed eyes anymore. When I close my eyes here. When I close my eyes here, I open them into another place. Okay, so I'm in, let's call it a waiting room. Metallic place. I'm kind of a child, I guess? Or the size of one at least. In this room, with a few other children. Just waiting. Just being there, you can feel the hospital/doctor atmosphere. Metal walls. Kind of like what you'd imagine a giant spaceship to be. The hallways were all the same, and kind of segmented. Each piece joins to the next and everything looks exactly the same. I can't explain it exactly, but maybe you can get the picture. A nurse had come in, and checked on each one of us. Kept on looking at her clipboard, and then back at us. She had turned around to leave through the almost Star Trek doors, when all of a sudden these alarms went off. Ear splitting, everything would turn red, then normal. Then red, then normal. Nurse turned around in shock, with her eyes wide open, and ran through another door. The doctor came rushing through saying something like, I knew it was too early. He had a surgical mask covering the lower part of his face, and some kind of unusual glasses on. Looked directly at me, and I just had the worst feeling ever. Whatever he did, that look sent me spiraling back to the real world. My normal DMT trip had literally ended 5 minutes earlier than it should have. I'd smoked the stuff at the very least 20 times at this point, spread out across multiple months of course, so I kind of knew how long it should have lasted. For me, the main trip only goes for about 12 minutes. But shit, it feels like hours. Second trip coming up after this. Time for my evening coffee.
Also grabbed my evening coffee. Please continue, I am fascinated. Main question I have is, these are strikingly different than your normal DMT trip, which is just a macabre of nonsensical geometric entities, isn't it? Because whenever I see these threads, people will go, oh bruh, I totally know what that's like, and then go on to describe your standard psychedelic DMT breakthrough. They fail to realize that even a breakthrough DMT trip is nothing like this. It's like you are waking out of the simulation, and even the DMT breakthrough experience is a part of the code of the simulation, a hack if you will. It's like a new, fully rendered, realier than real, reality that you can focus on. And all these experiences seem to indicate that they are plugged back in by these scientists or whatever. They aren't just suddenly back in their body, they are put there. I wonder what happens if you aren't put back in there. Do you die here? Are we just a program that disappears?
Thank you. Sorry if I ramble a bit, but this substance is one that I feel is so important. For what? I have not a clue. There is something behind all of this. DMT. Not the hokey pokey shit they try to pump out in funded movie documentaries, or pop culture expand yo mind crap. There is something there. I've been in the hyperspace enough times to get a sense that there is something unlearned, or forgotten, that must be remembered. 3 grams, or 3,000 mgs, divided by let's say 30 mgs per dose, adds up to a lot of flights into hyperspace. That lasted me, God, at least a year and a half. Spaced apart to not damage my psyche, or destroy the image of how people perceive me. I mean, just by looking at me one could imagine I've had a trip or two in my times, but 100 DMT-driven flights to parts unknown, you might not think that. Ha. Sorry, DMT, well, where DMT takes you, is a very important place to me. I haven't been there in a good 6 years, and that saddens me, but retelling these stories from time to time brings me right the fuck back there. I can still see the doctor's face, and his shock, from my next trip report. But, to answer your question, 100% yes. I've been to the caverns where what almost look like heat waves 1 minute, and the most intense fractal patterns that make you go dizzy the next. I've been to some kind of recreation of an ancient pyramid when it was active, and its people still thrived. I've been smacked by a gang of time-tripping bullies when I messed up my 4th or 5th time. I've seen patterns overlaying every single piece of matter in my line of sight, but I've only had 2 of these, tears in reality. I tried to explain it to my only other friend who had the balls to even try the stuff, and the easiest way I could is, have you ever fallen asleep one night, only to wake up what feels like a second later, and it's already morning? You close your eyes 1 second, only to open them again to something totally different? I.e. night/day? God. Too much talking. Or better yet, try to picture this. You know how you can change the channel, flip to another station, 1 second you're watching the news, the next, cartoons. When I close my eyes in this reality, the inside of my eyelids are already open to another one. Regular DMT trips are nothing like these. There was literally no indication I was tripping. I was just, somewhere else. Not high. Not low. Not anything. But somewhere else. No fractals, no weird physics, nothing. Just, a brand new place, that seriously seemed like it was already there, before me. I used to be, well, I'm sure I still am, but a member of the DMT Nexus. If you're seriously interested in this field, I'd suggest you look into that place. My handle was soy_sauce, either an underscore, or just a space. And I think I have 12 or so trip reports up there. Haven't been in 6+ years though, so I'm not too sure anymore. Anyways, on to trip number 2. The one where I notice the doctor, and he notices me. Okay, so this time, I do my usual, sit back and close my eyes. The regular, spiral staircase as I like to call it appears, and I'm thrown back into hyperspace again. Back in that same hospital for lack of a better term again, but I can tell I'm taller. More like I am here, I can tell because I can see things at a more normal eye level. My eyes are up 3/4 of the way at the doors now, instead of below 1/2, my first time, when I said I felt like I was a child. Blank room. More metallic than gray. Mildly shiny. This room was more like the corner of a hallway, where the hallway turns 90 degrees and keeps going, but exactly at that corner, there was a room. Just, pop, there I was, in that room. Just, there. Already, I knew that one door I could not go into, and one door I could leave through, if I wanted to. Once I realized, and acknowledged that, the door I couldn't enter opened up, and a nurse, almost identical to the first one I had seen, came rushing out. Now, the nurses had on what I assumed to be nurse outfits. I just kind of knew, they were. They didn't look the same as the old nurse from the 50s, but that's what it reminded me of. They had a kind of hat on, and a surgical mask too, so you could only really see eyes, and some hair. She proceeded to grab my arm, up close to my armpit, and made me start walking. No words were said, but a lot was going on. A lot of understanding. Already knowing. Now, that room I was in, and the one she had came from, had a very nice, inviting, cool blue hue to them. The lighting was very warming. When she came out, you could tell just by her eyes alone, that something was very wrong. Bad, even. She rushed me out of that room, out through the door I knew I could enter on my own, had she not appeared. The lighting was gray. Much grayer than the room I had arrived, I guess I could call it, in. The air had an almost dusty look to it. Gritty. But you couldn't feel it. Or taste it. No breathing in hyperspace. Those alarms were going off. Just like in my last visit to this place. And that trip was months before this one. It wasn't a 1-2 kind of thing. I had tripped many times between these two, gone to many different places, and had I not written the first one down, I might not have connected the two together. Those alarms were going off out there. Crazy how I couldn't hear them the next room over. But as soon as I had thought that, I knew it was because of the way this place was. The segmented feeling of the way the building I was in was. And I use the word building just because it's the only way I know how to describe what I was in. Ship. It had almost a submarine type feel, the way everything was metallic, and compartmentalized. Those alarms. The sounds that it made. And every time it went off, the lights turned to a shade of red, and you could see the grit in the air. There were doors lining the hallway, and I knew that if I went through this specific door, I can point to it in my mind, but I can't explain it, that I'd get out of here. Kind of like the exit. She made me turn right, maybe 3 doors down, and we went into an almost completely dark room. Light enough for me to see the operating/examination table in there. Don't really remember what else was in there, because I had started to get worried. Scared, almost. After my 5th or so trip, I had started to get the hang of it, and like everybody else who's done it says, there's nothing to worry about when you're under, don't fight it and you'll be fine. It didn't scare me anymore. I realized that when you were scared, it started to warp the trips, and make them scary. If you freak out, the trip does too. Never freak out, never a bad trip. And that had always worked. But this shit was so damn real, and I mean, I just smoked some fucking DMT, I'm not watching a movie or something. I'm tripping, right? I tried to calm down as best I could because I was just tripping. Just let it take you. Where it's going. Just ride the wave, bro. So, she walks me right up to the table, and just lets go. In hyperspace, you don't really ask questions, you just kind of know. You mentally wonder, ask I guess, and the answer is already in there. You're just making the two join. So, obviously I get onto the table. It looks metal, bent upward closer to the top/head area, like a pillow. Getting on it felt very soft though, not hard and flat, like it appears. Didn't even think about it. I was still really uneasy about what was going on. This was just another trip though. What the hell? Then she had strapped me down. One across my chest/bicep area, and 1 inches above my knees. They weren't too tight, so things could have been worse. But I was trying to keep my cool. This was the most intense trip I had ever fucking had. The realness of it all was almost too intense. By the time I had noticed the straps weren't on too tightly, she had already left the room, and the door was closing. I had looked back in the door's direction, and just that simple action, tilting my head back, and to the left some, to see, was enough, I think. The doors started closing, I had moved my head to look back, and the straps started tightening all at the same time. Like, tightening. You could hear the hum of electricity, or something, as the straps tightened. I was still looking back, and it just freaked me the fuck out, so badly. I could actually feel them, pushing against me. Really feel them. I'm not tripping anymore, I can't be. This is too fucking much. I had pulled back. The straps were pulling me towards the table, I mentally pulled myself back/inward. Too much. Fuck. I felt my whole self shift back. Not my body. But me. My mentality, for lack of a better word. That second, When I mentally pulled back, I had felt something. It felt like I had actually went backwards a bit. Didn't feel scared, didn't feel anything, anymore. I couldn't feel the straps anymore, either. I opened my eyes, and it was like I was wearing a pair of sunglasses right up against my face, but the glasses didn't move when I pulled back. I did. I could see something, somewhere else. I could see into somewhere else. About a 1-inch strip, around my entire peripheral, was a solid black. When I pulled back, it had like pulled my vision back with it. I could see those widescreen black bars. But off to the left though, like when you're looking straight ahead, off to the left right above your shoulder, if I looked just right, I could see something. Some kind of light. I wasn't scared, or anything, anymore. So I wasn't afraid to pull back a little further to see that light. I could feel this, me, getting further away from that me over there, strapped to the bed thing though, and that was concerning. But I wasn't. When I pulled back a little more, somebody came into view, sitting in front of a screen. His mask and glasses lit up from the light of the screen. It was the doctor from the other trip. Same fucking guy. Same hair, same glasses, and they all wore the same surgical masks, but it was him. The second I noticed that, and had a feeling, I know it's you, he noticed me, noticing him. I can't really comprehend what he saw, or how he could see me, when I could see me, strapped to that bed. It drives me crazy trying to figure it out. But the look of shock on his face, the way his eyes opened up so very wide, he touched something on that screen so fast, and pop, I was out of it. I was back in the regular world, wiping the drool from my mouth. Now, every time I trip, that spiral staircase happens. And every time I come back down, it happens again, only backwards. This time, and only this time, that didn't happen. He hit that screen, and I instantly woke back up here. Only about 15 minutes had passed. I was so dumbfounded. I didn't trip again for at least 6 months. Only after writing it down, with my other trip reports. Last part. Sorry about the length, I'll never forget that place. Only after writing it down, had I noticed that I've been there before. I was in that same place, once before, and I had seen those same things another time. For some reason, I was much smaller the other time, and I was with others as well, like they knew we were coming that first time, and this last time, I was more unexpected. The most notable part of that trip was the fact that besides me knowing I was tripping, there was nothing else going on that would make me believe I was. It was so smooth, and everything looked so natural. The most unreal high-def shit you've ever seen. There was not one fractal pattern, besides me entering the spiral staircase, no trippy vibes. Nothing. I have never tripped like that before. I've seen enough to know what tripping is, and that wasn't fucking tripping. I went somewhere else. My consciousness went somewhere else. My body was back in my bed, knocked the fuck out, but my mind, me, I wasn't there. And those other beings I was with, they weren't a part of me. The things you see, the beings. Once you venture into that space long enough, you realize that they're not a mental projection, or whatever you want to call it. They're real, and they're their own beings. I'm literally just visiting. The shock on that doctor's face made me fully aware of that. The genuine look of what how to do scared me. The way it reacted, the panic. I swear, that place is real. Somewhere. Again, sorry for the length, it's just fuck, when you remember something, you remember it, yeah no.
Okay, as I read this I am taken back to my first really serious psychedelic experience in 10th grade. It traumatized me for a long time. It was on NBO-me. I was also in a sort of metallic gray place. It had that hospital/doctor atmosphere. Except I don't think I was supposed to have woken up. I'm pretty sure what I was a humanoid type creature, but in this place, I had no concept of human or identity. Yet I possessed some sort of rationality. Let me explain. I was experiencing a sort of ego death outside my control before this, leading my friends to turn to me in unison and say in sync, "This happens to everyone once in their life." Or something of this sort. I will never forget them all turning to me at the same time and saying this. I wasn't even scared at this point because all of my faculties of fear had been broken down by what was happening. Suddenly I was somewhere else. No more visuals, no more psychedelia. Just a grayish room. I don't remember being in a hospital bed or pod or anything. I might have been, but my memory is very foggy. All I remember is sitting in that room, seeing other fleshy creatures around me, I assume humanoids. I had forgotten what a human was, keep in mind. I think I was able to talk or something because I basically said in a terrified whisper, "Hello," or at least the idea behind hello was uttered. These other creatures received this but didn't respond. This was all I remember, but there was something or creature observing us in the center of the room. It seemed anti-material in nature. My mind has blocked out the rest other than frames of images. I remember seeing another human. This I had a better conception of what a human was. I assume due to the length I was in this place I started to kinda understand what I and these creatures were. It looked like this pic because of the lack of ego filter to understand what we were. Imagine forgetting completely who and what you are and then seeing a human for the first time. It looked something like this. I guess this is why those thumb movies always scared the fuck out of me when I was younger. This other human, if I remember correctly, was also scared and had woke up from this shit too. In fact, I think there were a couple of us that had, because I remember a "we're in this together" terrifying solidarity with these things of which I was. My last memory of being here was an outdoor place. I honestly don't fucking know what happened. I wonder if we somehow slipped through the cracks and tried to escape or made it out somehow but were captured. Because that shit felt realier than my entire life. It wasn't even psychedelic, it was an entirely new reality I had woken up from. I couldn't remember my family or mother but knew that in whatever simulation I was in, I had some sort of family or people I was close with. But in this new realm, I felt nothing for them. It was literally like a video game character, my own mother. How you maybe feel a sort of connection with the character but now you know it wasn't even real. That was the scariest part of being in this reality, the fact that I had nobody to run to comfort me. I was completely alone other than these other beings like me in the immediate area that for some reason had also just woken up out of this. And we were able to slightly communicate things like, "We need to get out of here, what do we do?" I wonder if it was a sort of mini mass awakening and me and a few other humans woke up to this. I wonder if anyone else in the world remembers this. Or maybe it's all a delusion. I fucking hope it was. I really hope so. But if it wasn't, then that means that we are without a doubt in a highly advanced simulation from birth. Being in this reality was like being a baby born with a 15-year-old brain. Another thing worth mentioning. 2 years after this, I smoked a large amount of wax with my close friend after having no tolerance. Suddenly, a similar feeling started and I lost my ego filter again. I looked at my friend and he looked just like the other humans looked in my previous trip. Just a strange organism, like I completely lost my memory and saw a human being for the first time. There was no mental label or category on anything in my immediate vision, it was just spatial. But despite this, it still felt real, but just realier than real, like I observed the base reality. So this makes me think that maybe I didn't actually wake up from a simulation in a lab but was actually just seeing my friends who were there tripping with me, but just seeing them without my ego. Because after this experience of being in another reality, I ended up going back and forth between them. Suddenly I'm sitting there smoking a bowl with my friends, but WTF? I was just in a different place. Then suddenly I had full-blown spiritual ego death and saw the world down its smallest units and was communicated divine intelligence through fractalized patterns. So maybe it's just my 10th grade mind being unable to comprehend what I had witnessed, maybe it was just my friends I was seeing, but the other weird thing is that after the final phase of the trip, the ego death and spiritual revelation, I woke up at 3 to 4 a.m. in the dark as if I had just been asleep and it was all a dream. I don't know guys, For a long time I chalked it up to just a delusional vision due to the weird nature of N-bones, or just saw the base reality of the physical world, or just a complete manifestation of random shit. But what keeps me up at night is the idea that maybe what I saw was real. And these trips about waking up in a lab or observing room in which no psychedelic visuals persist, a realier than real experience like that? That's what keeps me up at night.
The observation room. I think that's what I had called my first trip in that place, too. The way that thing was watching, studying you. I felt that. It honestly sounds like the same kind of place that I was in. Medical in nature. Almost a nursing home / rehabilitation center. A place to study and learn. Apparently about us. I don't know. But it's just weird how people can have such similar experiences in altered states like these, which produce uncontrollable outcomes. I mean, we've all been to a hospital at least once in our lives, so there's always that, but tripping is one thing, and this sure as hell wasn't tripping.
Dat feel when humans have lost a space war. The winning side wanted to eliminate humans as a threat, but didn't want to eradicate the entire species. So they've trapped humans in a shitty simulation. Go be humans somewhere else.
On 600 plus mics of acid I got stuck in the loop, except this time I was an infinitely respawning cube of meat, being eaten by interdimensional cannibals wearing my friends' faces. Every sensation was received differently to how one would expect. Smoking a bong was interpreted as one of the cannibals ashing a cigarette into the meat cube, which was me. I could feel the slight sensation of being torn apart, but as if the pain was extremely dulled. When I walked around it felt like my mind was just wandering and constructing a different perspective, not that I was actually walking somewhere. Almost everything the cannibals said seemed to relate back to me being eaten in some way, often joking, sometimes not. The whole meat cube thing wouldn't have been so bad, but every few moments I would forget and then realize with an all too new terror what was happening to me. The real kicker was when my dad brought out a platter of ham and was asking me if I wanted some. It was like the big boss cannibal was hanging the irony right in front of my face, and he kept saying more ham, when all I could think was less ham. There were more hectic moments later where it felt like the demiurge, or some other powerful force, was testing my will and wit to see if I was worthy of surviving, but that's another story. Take from this what you will.
I didn't have the chance to read every post in this thread, but I've had an eerily similar experience. Pig related is sort of what it looks like, very abstract, flat, and black. The smaller blobs going off into the distance are the consciousness or souls of people who have just died, or come close enough to temporarily wake up. They are all being shepherded in some way by the larger shapes, which are something far more than human. I know it doesn't look like much, but imagine being ripped from your body and existing as one of these gray blobs, with no memories of who you are, how you got there, zero ability to perceive the passage of time, the shared sensation with a few other nearby blobs of what's happening, etc. Eventually my awareness drew the attention of one of the large shapes, which seemed angered, so I attempted to run away. Movement in this place is also very different, like you can physically feel the environment around you as you move, it is part of you for a bit. Anyway, eventually I was able to speak to two of the larger shapes who telepathically explained that all of my memories, the entire universe, etc. was an experiment. We were outside of the universe looking in. It was about the size of a basketball and they loomed far above me. They were very terse and seemed more annoyed at my presence, like if you were trying to work and a toddler was asking if the sky was really blue. One other thing I'll say that no one else seemed to have mentioned, was after I lost my body, but before I arrived with all of the other blobs / people I was telepathically barraged with questions. Like a screening, and if I didn't answer fast enough I wouldn't be placed with the other blobs, I would just cease to exist. I could fill hundreds of posts about all this shit, it was so complex, human language can never really convey it. I hope it's not where we go when we die, it was the most terrifying thing that happened in my life.
I've shared this story here before. This doesn't involve drugs, just dreaming. Sometimes, when I dream, I go to a familiar place that I've never been to before. It's so familiar, that as a young man, I made Doomcad levels to revisit it in the waking world. It's an empty city. The city is in that stage of construction where the rebar has been put in and the concrete has been poured, but there's no glass or carpet put in anywhere yet. An entire unfinished city. The place I spawn in this dream is always the same. I wake up in a tall multi-story building, to the sight of red sunlight pouring in from the horizon. It's always just before dusk there, almost sunset, but the sun never actually sets for as long as I'm there. Sometimes it feels like hours. I always approach a window, and look down upon the streets below. There's a triangular area that will someday be a park, but is currently just a dirt lot. I can see the tracks of dirt left by construction vehicles driving out from the triangle area on the fresh black asphalt of the streets, which haven't been turned gray/brown yet by the passage of heavy traffic. I can feel warm wind on my face coming in from the window. I can feel the sun's warmth too. Gravity works differently here. With a small running start, I can leap clear over that triangle park to another unfinished tall building perpendicular to the one I spawned in. I even have some small degree of control while in midair, being able to land in another unglassed window in that next building. I've never encountered another soul there, but I have found evidence of people being there before. Cigarette butts in the dirt. A Chinese work safety brochure of some kind. This makes me suspect the empty city is in China. Maybe I dream of it because I heard of those empty cities in China before, but these dreams started when I was young, so I tend to discount this possibility. I've been there so many times now. Seemed like the right thread to share this story.